As you watch this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so that whenever I post a new video, you'll be the first to be notified. I'll never forget the day Kofi defied his family. That was the day everything came crashing down when his father, Mr. Kwame Asante, disowned him in front of the whole family, and his mother, Mrs. Abina Asante, burst into tears, calling him a disgrace to their name. I was there. I saw it all. Kofi Asante was not your average man. At just 33 years old, he had built one of the most successful tech companies in Ghana, a business that provided software solutions to banks and government institutions. People respected him, envied him even. He drove the latest Range Rover, wore tailored suits from London, and dined in the most exclusive restaurants in Accra. He was the man everyone wanted to be. But despite all his wealth and power, Kofi was different from most rich men I knew.
He didn't look down on people.
He treated everyone with respect, whether it was the gatekeeper at his office or the old women selling oranges on the roadside. I think that's why he fell for Alma. Alma wasn't what you'd call extraordinary. She was a simple girl from Medina who sold kelaweel, spiced fried plantains, at a roadside stall. Her life was miles apart from the luxury Kofi was used to, but Alma had a charm that was hard to ignore. Her beauty wasn't flashy, but there was something about the way she carried herself, with quiet confidence and a smile that made you feel at ease. The first time Kofi met Alma, it was purely by accident. His car had broken down near her stall one evening, and while he waited for the mechanic, the smell of her freshly fried plantains lured him in. He bought a small portion, and they struck up a conversation. "You don't look like someone who eats kelaweel often," Alma had teased, her eyes twinkling. Kofi laughed. "You're right, but maybe I've been missing out." From that day on, Kofi kept coming back, not for the kelaweel, but for Alma. It wasn't long before their relationship deepened. Kofi would spend hours at her stall, helping her serve customers and joking around with the kids who came to buy plantains. Alma, on the other hand, treated Kofi like any other person. She didn't care about his money or his status. She liked him for who he was, just Kofi. But when Kofi decided it was time to introduce Alma to his family, I knew trouble was coming. The day Kofi brought Alma to their East Legon mansion, the tension in the air was palpable. I was in the kitchen helping with dinner preparations, but I could hear everything from the living room. "Who is this girl?" Mr. Kwame's voice rang out like a thunderclap. Kofi's voice was steady. "This is Alma, the woman I love." I peeked out from the kitchen and saw Mr. Kwame staring at Alma like she was an insect that had crawled into his home. Alma, to her credit, stood tall, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Mrs. Abina was the first to react. She clutched her chest dramatically. "Kofi, have you lost your mind? This girl sells kelaweel by the roadside. How can you bring her here as someone you want to marry?" Kofi's jaw tightened. "What does her job have to do with anything? She's hardworking, kind, and she makes me happy. Isn't that what matters?" "What matters," Mr. Kwame said coldly, "is that you're an Asante. You come from a family of class and dignity. You will not embarrass us by marrying some street vendor." Alma spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm but firm. "With all due respect, sir, I may not come from wealth, but I'm not ashamed of who I am. I work hard for an honest living, and I care deeply for your son." I admired her courage, but it only seemed to make things worse. "Kofi," Mr. Kwame said, rising from his chair, "I forbid you from seeing this girl again. You're a man of status. You'll marry someone who is worthy of this family's name." Kofi met his father's gaze, unflinching. "Alma is the woman I want to spend my life with, and nothing you say will change that." Mrs. Abina burst into tears. "Kofi, please. Think of the shame. What will people say when they hear that the great Kofi Asante is marrying a kelaweel seller?" Kofi looked at his mother, his voice softening. "I love her, Mama. Isn't that enough?" But it wasn't enough for the Asantes. That night, after Alma had left, the arguments continued. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to clean, but I heard every word. "You're throwing your life away, Kofi," Mr. Kwame bellowed. "Do you know how many wealthy families would give anything for their daughters to marry you? And yet you choose this?" She's not this, father, Kofi said. Her name is Alma. And she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. You'll regret this, Mr. Kwame warned. Mark my words. But Kofi didn't back down. He was willing to risk everything, his wealth, his status, even his family's love, for the chance to be with Alma. And that was just the beginning. Kofi had always been the golden child, the pride of the Asani family. His parents often boasted about him to their friends, his intelligence, his wealth, his success. But now, it seemed all of that was forgotten. The day he stood up to his father and refused to give up on Alma, everything changed. True to his word, Mr. Kwame cut him off completely. Kofi woke up the next morning to find his bank accounts frozen, his company's shares revoked, and even his car repossessed. It was as if his father wanted to erase every trace of his former life. I remember the day he left their East Legon mansion for good. He packed a single duffel bag and handed me the keys to his car. Take care of them, Kojo, he said, referring to his family. I'm not sure when I'll be back. Where will you go? I asked. Medina, he replied simply. Alma's place. And just like that, the millionaire who once had the world at his feet walked away from it all. Living in Medina was a far cry from the life Kofi was used to. Alma's small apartment was cramped, with only one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area that doubled as a storage space for her Kelawheel supplies. There was no air conditioning, no lavish furniture, just the bare essentials. But Kofi didn't seem to mind. Alma tried to make things easier for him. She cooked his meals, insisted on doing his laundry, and even offered to take on extra hours at her stall to support them both. But Kofi wasn't the type to sit around and do nothing. He decided to put his skills to use. Using the little savings he had left, Kofi rented a small kiosk in the heart of Medina and started a phone repair business. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was barely enough to cover their expenses, but it gave him a sense of purpose. I visited him one day at the kiosk. He was hunched over a table, carefully fixing the cracked screen of an old Nokia phone. His hands, once used to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, were now calloused and stained with grease. Kofi, I said, are you sure about this? You've lost everything. Was it worth it? He looked up and smiled. I haven't lost everything, Kojo. I still have Alma. And as long as I have her, I'll be fine. His optimism was admirable, but it wasn't easy. The people of Medina were curious about him at first. They couldn't believe that the famous Kofi Asante, whose name once graced the cover of business magazines, was now living among them, fixing phones and helping Alma sell Kelawheel. Some admired his humility, while others whispered behind his back. But the hardest part wasn't the gossip or the struggle to make ends meet. It was the pressure from Alma's family. Alma's mother, Auntie Efua, was a kind woman, but she was also practical. One evening, she pulled Kofi aside after dinner. Kofi, I admire your determination, she began, but are you sure this is the life you want? Alma deserves a stable future, and right now, you can barely provide for her. Kofi nodded. I understand, Auntie. But I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to make Alma happy. I'll build a new life for us, no matter how long it takes. Alma's younger brother, Kofi, wasn't as supportive. He made no effort to hide his disdain. So, this is your big plan? He scoffed one day when he saw Kofi repairing phones. You gave up a life of luxury to do this? What kind of man are you?
Kofi didn't respond.
He knew Kofi's words came from a place of love for his sister, but they still stung. Alma, however, remained his anchor. She stood by him through every challenge, encouraging him when things got tough, and reminding him of why they had chosen this path. One day, everything came to a head. Mrs. Abina, Kofi's mother, showed up at Alma's stall unannounced. She looked like a shadow of her former self. Her usually flawless makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red from crying. Alma, she said, her voice trembling, leave my son alone. Please. You've ruined his life. Alma's hands shook as she set down the bowl of plantains she was frying. She took a deep breath and turned to face Mrs. Abina. With all due respect, Ma, I didn't ruin Kofi's life. He made his choice and I'll stand by him, no matter what. You think love is enough? Mrs. Abina snapped. You think you can build a life on love alone? Kofi had everything, and now he is nothing because of you? Alma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. I didn't ask him to give up anything, Ma. He chose this because he loves me. And I love him too. Isn't that worth something? For a moment, Mrs. Abina looked like she wanted to argue, but instead, she just shook her head. You don't understand what you've done, she said quietly before walking away. Alma broke down after she left. Maybe your mother's right, she said to Kofi that night. Maybe I've ruined your life. Kofi pulled her into his arms.
Don't say that, Alma.
You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'd rather struggle with you than live a comfortable life without you. Life in Medina wasn't easy, but their love never wavered. Slowly, Kofi's phone repair business began to pick up. Customers started recommending him to their friends, and he earned enough to make life a little more comfortable for him and Alma. But the shadow of his family's disapproval loomed large. Every now and then, I'd hear rumors that Mr. Kwame was considering taking legal action to prevent Kofi from using the family name in his business dealings. It seemed like no matter how hard Kofi tried to move on, his father wasn't ready to let him go. Still, Kofi remained hopeful. One day, he told me, they'll see that I made the right choice. Until then, I'll keep building my life with Alma, one step at a time. Little did he know that day was closer than he thought. The day Kofi and Alma decided to marry was a turning point in their journey. They didn't have a grand wedding or the approval of Kofi's family, but they had each other, and for them, that was enough. Alma's family, initially uncertain, rallied behind them. With Auntie Efua's help, they organized a simple ceremony in Medina. The wedding wasn't extravagant. There were no white doves or sparkling chandeliers, just a community coming together to support two people who had chosen each other above all else. Alma's dress was handmade, a modest white lace gown that she had sewn with Auntie Efua. The love in the room wasn't measured in how much was spent, but in the authenticity of the moment. Kofi was in his navy suit, a little rough around the edges, but no less genuine. As Alma walked down the aisle, Kofi's eyes never left her. There was no luxury here, no lavish display of wealth, just raw, beautiful love. The vows they exchanged were simple yet profound. I don't have much to give you, Kofi said, his voice thick with emotion, but I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by you for the rest of my life. Alma's voice trembled as she responded, You've already given me everything. Your love, your heart. I promise to cherish you, no matter what life throws at us. The officiant was about to pronounce them husband and wife, when the doors of the hall suddenly opened. Everyone turned to see none other than Mr. Kwame Asante, Kofi's father, stepping inside. Kofi froze. His father, who had rejected him for months, was here. The room went quiet, the tension almost unbearable. I was wrong, Mr. Kwame said, his voice carrying through the stillness. Kofi, I see now that I was blinded by my pride. I thought you needed money, status. I see that I was wrong. I give you my blessing. Kofi's face showed disbelief as he processed his father's words. Father, love is more important than any wealth, Mr. Kwame continued. If Alma makes you happy, then I'm happy for you both. Mrs. Abina, his mother, stepped forward, wiping away her tears. Welcome to the family, Alma, she said, embracing her tightly. Kofi stood there for a moment, taking in the incredible shift in his parents' stance. Then, with a wide grin, he turned to Alma and whispered, I knew this day would come. Their wedding continued, with the weight of the past lifting with each passing minute. Mr. Kwame and Mrs. Abina joined in the celebration, and for the first time in a long while, the family was whole again. In the months that followed, Kofi and Alma built a life together. Simple, but filled with love. They didn't need the trappings of wealth to be happy. Kofi's phone repair business grew steadily, and Alma's Kelawil stall became a popular spot. They found contentment in the small victories, the quiet mornings, the laughter over shared meals, and the joy of knowing they had truly fought for what they wanted. Kofi's relationship with his parents was slow to rebuild, but with time, The bond grew stronger. Mr. Kwame offered Kofi a loan to help expand the business, but Kofi declined. "I've got it covered, father," he said. "I'm doing it my way now." Though their journey had been difficult, Kofi and Alma's love was unbreakable. It had withstood the trials of rejection, poverty, and doubt. And in the end, that was all that mattered. That brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, do like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos.
Thank you.